like to explain about the history, the function, the structure, and the decision making in United Nations. The first is history. Before we explain you about the United Nations establishment, I will explain you about the history of United Nations in brief. So here's the timeline. After the World War I, there is the form of League of Nations in 1915, and then the World War II happened in 1939. The World War II led the Atlantic Charter in 1941, and finally in 1945 the United Nations was formed and marked by the San Francisco Conference. I will explain you more. Starting from 1915, the United States had the idea of forming a league. The league aim is to keep the world away from the threat and danger of war. Furthermore, Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States on January 10, 1920, formed the League of Nations, although the US itself late never joined this organization. A total of 42 countries were made member as League of Nations was established. 23 of them remained as member until League of Nations was dissolved in 1946. Between 1920 until 1937, 21 countries were made members, but 7 of 21 additional members later terminated themselves or some were expelled before 1946. The purpose of the formation of this league is none other than to create and maintain world peace, and to realize cooperation between nations that meet mutual expectation. Woodrow Wilson hopes that this institution will play an active role in helping to prevent wars and disputes between nations to be resolved in a peaceful manner. The purpose of League of Nations was felt to be not going well because it was proven by the outbreak of the Second World War, with the number of victims who were not kidding. This war took place between Hitler Germany and Mussolini Italy. World War II became the trigger of the world to realize an organization that was truly able to achieve world peace. Then US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt presented the idea of holding a meeting whose outcome was the Atlantic Charter. In the United Nations Conference on International Organization in San Francisco in April 1945, there are representatives from 50 countries and also there are 46 nations, including the four sponsors, were originally invited to the San Francisco Conference. They come together to create the United Nations Charter, which officially signed on June 26 and went into effect on October 24, 1945. Second is function of UN.
Here I'm going to explain what is the United Nations, the function, and the purpose. So what is the United Nations? The UN is an international organization made of 193 member states. And these states, they work together, cooperate together in order to solve issues that are facing humanity today. Now we turn to the function of the UN. The UN's function, as mentioned before, is to take care of issues concerning humanity, and these include maintaining internal peace and security, protecting human rights, delivering humanitarian aid, promote sustainable developments, and upholding international law. The UN also acts or functions as a forum for its members to express their views. They can conduct dialogue and negotiations, and the governments can also agree and solve problems together through the borders and through the bodies and committees in the UN. To the purpose of the UN. The UN's main purpose is to maintain international peace and security. The second purpose is to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of the people. The third is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems. These problems can include economic, social, cultural, or of humanitarian character. And the fourth and last purpose is to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of these common ends.
The third is the structure of UN.
Well, United Nations divided into 6 main parts. First is United Nations General Assembly, United Nations Security Council, United Nations Economic and Social Council, United Nations Trusteeship Council, International Court of Justice, and United Nations Secretariat. United Nations General Assembly which include nearly all international recognized countries making up 193 member states. The Assembly meets annually in September and debates issues on security and diplomacy. In 2015, the major of the topic was climate change and helping developing countries face the threat of global warming. General Assembly resolution relating to defense as well as administrative issues like new membership and budget require two-thirds vote. Most other issues only need a majority. Every country regardless of size get a single vote. However, there are two states which in the United Nations which are not actual members: the Vatican, whose government is called the Holy See, and Palestine. These are called permanent and non-members of separate states. While they cannot vote, they are allowed to take part in debates.
Inside the General Assembly, there is another institution like UN funds, programmers, and other entities. In general, the funds and programmers are established by a resolution of the UN General Assembly and have a focused mandate. They are funded either mainly or entirely through voluntary contribution and have a governing body that reviews their activities. The example of the funds and programmers and other entities is like the UNCTAD, UNHCR, and UNDP. Gonna explain about the UNDP. So the United Nations Development Programs help the developing countries in their economic and social development, manage and coordinate technical assistance provided through the United Nations, and then report to the General Assembly.
The second arm of the UN is the Security Council. It exists to prevent conflict on a large scale, promoting peace through diplomacy or sanctions. It only has 5 permanent members: Russia, France, China, UK, and the US, which were the winning powers in World War II. The permanent members have veto power, and their use has been incredibly controversial. The US, for example, has vetoed dozens of resolutions against Israel for their actions in the Middle East. There are 10 more members representing Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Europe. The states are elected on a rolling basis every 2 years to make sure the world region have representation. The Security Council resolutions are carried out by the UN Peacekeeping Force, which boasts about 100,000 soldiers. One of the most important parts of the UN is the Economic and Social Council, which works to improve standards of living and support human rights. Most of what the UN actually does is centered around helping developing countries. The Council works with specialized agencies like the World Health Organization and the High Commission for the Projects that happen.
Inside the Economic and Social Council, there is a functional commission. Inside the functional commission, there is a crime prevention and criminal justice, the United Nations Forum of Forests, and the social development. There are also the regional commission. Inside the regional commission, there are ECA or Economic Commission of Africa, ECE Economic Commission of Europe, and ESCAP or Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific.
And the judicial arm of the UN is the International Court of Justice. This is where international law violations are debated and prosecuted. Although countries with significant power can often refuse to comply with the decisions. The fifth arm of the UN is actually not operational. The Trusteeship Council was created in the 1940s to help developing territories and dependencies become independent countries. After helping more than 70 countries gain independence, the council was suspended in 1944. And finally, the Secretariat is actually the internal administrative workings of the United Nations. They are the ones who compile reports, communicate between the different councils, and are headed by the UN Secretary General. Although the UN exists to promote global cooperation, many have criticized the greater influence of the 5 permanent Security Council members. Still, the UN has seen incredible advances in hunger, poverty, child mortality, health care, drugs, women's rights, and improvement areas. Without communication and cooperation, the world will become considerably worse.
And the last is the decision making of UN.
Decisions are made in varying ways on specific meeting or issues. The common formula is a vote of all members with a simple majority deciding the outcome. This is what indicates to a majority of at least 2/3 of decisions on some issues such as membership. But there are many exceptions. For example, in the Security Council, 5 permanent members referred to as the V5 have a veto. There is also the Conference on Disarmament, where decisions are made by consensus, effectively giving every member state a veto. Decisions are often pre-negotiated. For instance, at the committee level in the General Assembly, or by group of states issued a big conference. This allowed world leaders to simply sign on the dotted line and smile for the camera.